George Martin. George, why do you hate me so much? I hear you hate people of color. What's going on here, man?
Well, I make an exception for you, Wayne.
I'm the only person
You're
of color you're willing to talk to.
the only one.
Nice, nice. No, I wanted to have you on the show, which I haven't had a podcast for a while because I've been busy with a lot of things. Because I think a lot of the critiques you had of the movement have ultimately been proven to be, if not completely true, certainly prescient about the way the world would turn. And I don't just mean the animal rights world; I mean the entire world. And I think I've known about your stuff for a long time, but I think the thing that came up most for me was this controversy involving Black Lives Matter. Do you remember this thing that Anonymous for the Voiceless posted? And
I have
think
no
you got in some
idea what
trouble
you're
for it.
talking about, Wayne. I have no idea about this incident. Please refresh my memory.
Okay, well, describe what happened and describe just to our audience, why you responded the way you did. And I will offer some pushback and critique, but tell me about what happened on Black Lives Matter, this post involving, I think it was a Black Lives Matter protester, right? And holding something that was a little disturbing for those of us who are animal rights activists.
Yeah, so we did this fantastic post at AV calling out the hypocrisy of this protester. He was holding a severed pig's head, parading down the street with it. And I think the meme said something like, hypocrisy is protesting against rights violations while violating the rights of others yourself. And we all remember what that year was like. There was this hysterical mass mania, cancel culture going around about anyone who dared even mention even the plight of the animals during that. I mean, we even had this, hashtag Blackout Tuesday stuff where it was like, how dare you be talking about animal rights today? Don't you know that this guy in Minnesota died and the whole world and the animal rights movement should grind to a halt for this? And so why on earth are you posting about this? So not only was it bad enough at that time to even just post about animal rights and not mention BLM in the eyes of the cancel mob who are baying for people's blood, we turned the notch up further by actually calling out the BLM protesters for using severed pigs' heads, as is our job to do as animal rights activists. If we see, we wouldn't stand for this in vegan spaces. If those same people who tried to cancel us, if they saw at an animal rights event us engaging in racism, they wouldn't say to those calling out the racism, now is not the time to call out racism. Pigs are dying in gas chambers. Didn't you know that donkeys are being ridden across Asia? And there you are whining about, racism at the animal rights protest. None of them would say that. But if you call out speciesism at a BLM protest, suddenly now you're the KKK, you're the bad guy. So there was a big furore over that. And I turned out to be right about the BLM movement as well. It was just a massive scam. The founders walked off with millions and bought themselves mansions and swimming pools with it. They're still looking into people to this day who have embezzled all this money in the Black Lives Matter movement. There's still not been even a shred of evidence that racism was involved in the death of George Floyd, which is this whole thing that started off the madness. And as you can imagine, me just saying this stuff all at that time and these predictions, it got me in a lot of hot water. But I think a lot of people now, I've had people since Wayne actually say, George, you actually turned out to be right about stuff. And I'm sorry that I treated you in this way and I'm a little bit embarrassed by it. So, yeah.
Okay. So there's some parts of what you just said that I agree with 100%. Some parts I disagree with so much that I almost want to shout. No, I'm just kidding. That's kind of the point. Kind of the point of this conversation is to say we need to have some thoughtful disagreements and realize they're going to be kind of areas of intense differing opinions that people just need to talk out. And so where I agree with you is that something pretty wild happened back in 2020 that led to not just divisiveness in the animal rights movement and communities around the world, but genuine fear. I mean, I think people were scared to disagree. People were scared to say anything that was different. People were scared to talk about animal rights. I have a friend who worked at a nonprofit at the time, and she effectively got fired for merely sending an email out about animal rights a few weeks after George Floyd was murdered. That's all it took. And people don't believe me when I say this. It's like, wait, she effectively got fired she didn't exactly get fired, but effectively got fired and had to leave the organization. And that literally is all she did. And it wasn't even kind of an out of the blue email about animal rights. It was like an email about animal rights that related to the work of the organization. And that was enough. That people were saying, you can only center Black Lives Matter. There's nothing else that matters in the world. This is the only thing that matters. That anyone who says anything else or even criticizes the movement anyway is a racist, a hateful person, deserves to be banned from society. Not the best way to mobilize people in support of your movement, by the way. And there's a lot of evidence on this. Where I disagree with you pretty strongly is the notion that Black Lives Matter is a scam. I think there were definitely scammers who were leading the movement, as there are scammers leading every movement. I think, there have been people who have been outed as dishonest, manipulative, power hungry within the animal rights movement. I don't think that means the animal rights movement is a scam any more than I think Black Lives Matter is a scam, just because some of the leaders have been acting with full ethical integrity. I also think George Floyd's murder 100% was, or not 100%, you can't say anything about with 100%, but I think there's high likelihood that racism played a role in it. And I do think it's different than most people think. So I think the evidence on this, and I think part of what disturbs me about the way these conversations have gone in the animal rights movement, and more frankly, just more generally on the left, and actually it's not just the left, it's on the right too, is how detached they are from reality. Like, no one seems to care that much about reality and evidence and data and the way the world actually works. And we're not 100% confident about police brutality and race. But the evidence we do have, including from some people who are pretty conservative social scientists, shows that it is actually true that Black people contingent on being stopped, after being stopped, are actually apparently not more likely to be killed than people of other races, including white people. If you're stopped by a cop, pretty much across all races, you're going to get killed at about the same rate. So, that would be an argument in your favor, that there isn't like this evidence of massive systemic racism. In contrast, there's very good evidence that you're much more likely to be stopped for doing exactly the same thing if you're a person of color. And this is true not just of Black people, it's true of Asian people, it's true of all sorts of people. And the reason is because cops generally see white people as more law-abiding. They see them as in positions of power and privilege, and are therefore much more likely to interrogate them, to harass them, to stop them on the street. And because there are many more stops, and there's one fascinating study done by this guy named John List, a conservative economist. He's not a left-wing Democrat dude. He's at the University of Chicago, which is a very conservative economics department. And he was actually the chief economist of Lyft. Actually, I think in the UK don't have Lyft, but it's basically Uber in the United States. He's the chief economist of Lyft. And what he did was he took this massive data set, probably the biggest data set of law enforcement that's ever existed in the face of the human species history. And he looked at every location where a Lyft driver was driving in the world and controlled for where they were stopped by the police, how fast their car was driving, the model of car, the time of the day, controlled on everything. Because this is a data set that had literally I think it was like hundreds of billions of data points, like a massive data set of driving. And what he found is that on average, for when you're driving exactly the same car at exactly the same speed at exactly the same location, your odds of getting stopped by the police are about 20 to 30% higher just because you're a person of color, right? And interestingly, you know what race was most likely to get stopped in this data set? You want to guess?
Don't know.
Asians. So Asians actually were the most likely to get stopped.
But then that wouldn't correlate with what you said about why they're least likely to stop white people, because Asians commit the least crime in the States. They're the most likely to obey the law. They're the most wealthy group. So it would actually be stranger in that wouldn't correlate with what you said.
But what I said was not about the reality of whether Asians or whites commit crimes. It's about perceptions. And I think the perception is, at least among Asian people, surprisingly, a lot of law enforcement perceive Asian people as potential illegal immigrants, as people who cheat and lie. So like there's this old, do you know this comedian Russell Peters?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has this actually kind of funny bit. It's very racist, but actually kind of funny. Maybe I shouldn't admit I think it's funny, but it is kind of funny. I can admit I think it's funny because it's mocking Chinese people. But he basically is he's doing this bit about how like an Indian person can't find a deal he likes and a Chinese person can't give you a deal, right? Basically. And he's just like saying, you know, and the problem is when Indian and Chinese people come together, Indian person's always trying to like basically get the cheapest price possible, and the Chinese person's trying to rip you off as much as possible. And they just can't come to a deal. So that's the bit. You can read about it. But I think the perception of Chinese people and Asian people in particular is that we're cheaters, that we're always trying to scam people, and we're illegals, that sort of thing. And the reality is, you're right. If you look at statistics, Chinese people actually commit far fewer crimes. That's not the perception of Chinese people, at least in the United States. We're considered the enemies of the United States. We're considered cheaters, scammers. People are going to deceive you, try and get your money. And therefore, you know, I didn't know this until his data set. You know, police officers, at least this is one theory as to why they're stopping people. It's because they see Chinese people as unwelcome in the community, unlikely to comply with the law, and therefore they stop them at much higher rates. But the point is, I mean, like you look at a data set like that, and it's impossible, in my view, to look at that data and say, okay, there's a problem of policing and racism in this country. You know, and I could send you the study if you'd like. I just shared with you some evidence about racism and policing. We had some problems with the Wi-Fi, but tell me what you think.
Yeah, so this wouldn't correlate in any way with... I can just grant that's true, right? Let's assume that what you've said is true and that non-white people are more likely to be stopped and stuff in the US. This would have nothing to do with George Floyd's death. So you have a black store worker, Charles Martin, calls the police, calls the very multiracial police department on a black criminal, George Floyd, who's trying to steal something by using a forged $20 bill. The multiracial minority white police force turn up, and a black officer and a white officer put George Floyd in the maximal restraint position, and then he dies of, I believe, a drug overdose. I don't see how any of this that you've mentioned before about who's more likely to be stopped or whatever it is would in any way correlate with this, because this is a black guy calling the cops on a black guy, and then a black guy and a white guy putting him in the maximal restraint technique. And then the camera, Wayne, I mean, look how this incident just like blew up all over the world. You have the black guy and the white guy both applying the same hold to George Floyd, but everyone just thinks about Derek Chauvin. It's just that portrait cell phone picture of Derek Chauvin. No one mentions Officer Kung, no one, or King, however his name's pronounced. No one even, you know, when I speak to people about what about Officer J. Alexander King, what do you think about his role in it? Who's that? It's all just Derek Chauvin this, Derek Chauvin that. Why does no one speak about the black cop?
Are you saying there was a black cop who was putting the same head restraint on George Floyd?
Yeah, the two officers.
Are you sure about this?
I'm sure about this. So
I've never heard this. Is there photo evidence of this or videographic evidence of this?
Yeah, you can watch the body cam footage. So there was two officers, a black officer and a white officer, putting Floyd in the maximal restraint. Then there was an Asian officer, Officer Tao, who was keeping the crowd at bay. And then a white officer, Thomas Lane, was standing nearby. But it was King and Chauvin, black and white, who were putting hold in the maximal restraint. And Charles Martin, who called the cops, is black.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, the people who argue, including me, that there's racism in policing, it doesn't depend on the notion that it's white police officers inflicting racism on black people, right? I mean, it's just the system as a whole, the training, the indoctrination, the culture of the system is one in which, I'll say, for example, I've not had a lot of, and I don't use my personal experiences because I particularly feel aggrieved by them, but I think they're just illustrative, and I know them to be true because I lived them and I've seen them happen.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of Chinese lawyers in powerful positions, but it is notorious within the Chinese community that the Chinese lawyers are not particularly kind to each other. That in some ways, the most racist lawyers are the other Chinese lawyers. And there's complicated reasons for that, but part of it is because, look, if part of the problem is the Chinese are always seen as like these traitorous, slanderous liars who are conspiring against America, then a Chinese lawyer who works with other Chinese lawyers is going to seem like a traitorous, slanderous lawyer who's conspiring with other anti-American people in the United States, right? And so there's a lot of like internalized kind of prejudice where you say like, oh shit, I got to like be with the white dudes because otherwise I'm not going to be cool. And so, I mean, the point isn't even necessarily that's exactly what happened with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. The point is the complaint about systemic racism is not that it is only white people inflicting racism on black people or, you know, white people inflicting racism on Chinese people. It's that the system as a whole, the culture, the norms, the policies are constructed in a way that disadvantages certain people, right? And another example of this would be the discrepancy between crack cocaine and powdered cocaine laws in the United States, where, you know, this is not white people or black people in either instance. It's just a law. It's a law that literally targets black people in America with far more serious criminal penalties when the drug is almost equivalent. I mean, in one case you sniff it, in one case you smoke it, and the people who sniff it, who happen to be white people, get a slap on the wrist. The people who smoke it, the black people, get 10 years in prison. It's a little more complicated story than that, but that's an example of the sort of systemic racism people are concerned about. On the specifics of George Floyd's scenario, you asked the question, how does this deal with race if, you know, it's a bunch of multiracial police officers, a black store clerk calling the police? And this is just an example of the point I'm trying to make, that when there's culture, when there's systems in place, laws that literally have been passed that make conduct that seems equivalent for black people much more dangerous than conduct by white people, then it's not about the individuals involved in the enforcement of the law. It's about the culture. It's about the policies. It's about the laws themselves, in which case that are maybe not even intentionally, but certainly in terms of disparate impact, affecting one class of people in a way that's much more negative than another class of people. And I honestly, in many ways, I almost feel like your position is surprising to me, because I feel like the argument you're making against people who are concerned about racism is an argument that a lot of people make about animals too. They say, well, don't you know animals hurt each other too? What's your problem? What are you, an idiot? Haven't you seen an animal killing another animal? Why do you care about humans killing animals? It's like, well, yeah, animals do kill other animals. That doesn't mean it's okay for us to kill animals. Frankly, from my perspective, doesn't mean it's okay for other animals to kill animals, even if it's the same species. I don't think it's any better that, you know, a pig is targeted by another pig or a dog is targeted by another dog. I got a dog who's the love of my life. He's a sweetheart who never hurt anyone. And if another dog, even an abused and oppressed dog, like another dog that was rescued from a dog fighting meet or dog meat market, you know, attacked and tried to hurt my dog, I'm fighting that dog off. I'm not going to say it's okay just because it's another dog attacking you. And so similarly, I mean, even if it were other black people targeting George Floyd, it doesn't matter. The point is no one should have to die because they use like a fake $20 bill, you know? And I think, I mean, specifically what I suspect is that if this had been some teenage white kid who played some stupid prank, the police don't even come. I know this because I have literally called the police in many cases where teenage white kids did these sorts of things to me when I was growing up in Indiana, and they never came. In fact, much worse things. Like I got attacked by a white kid who sliced my face open and left me, you know, with a gaping wound on my side that had to get stitched back up. I had to go to the ER. And like the police didn't care at all. And this guy was calling me a chink. And this is back in a time where, I mean, and again, I didn't even raise the race issue because back then I was like very young and I didn't even understand that racial dynamics played a role in the world. But even in a case where like a white teenager is calling a Chinese kid an ugly chink and slices his face open with a mouth, they just said, oh, it's just boys will be boys. While a black guy like uses a $20 bill and it's a fake $20 bill and doesn't even, I think he didn't even get away with it. Like he didn't actually steal anything. He just tried to do something. And suddenly a police officer is literally kneeling on the guy's head and kills him, right? There's something odd about that. I'm not saying you can't attribute that all to race. It's not just because the kid who attacked me is white and George Floyd was black. But I think the evidence shows pretty clearly race at least plays a key role in that.
I don't think it does at all. And I'll tell you what, Wayne, I think if the exact same thing happened to me, it wouldn't even make the paper. Do you know who Justine Damond is? No,
who's Justine Damond?
And this is part of the thing. So,
You got me. Oh no! All right, lay it on me. Justine
Damond was a white woman shot by police in
Oh,
Minneapolis.
shit. Now you make me feel bad. It's about someone getting killed.
So
I was joking about it, and now it's like, oh, George, come on, man.
Justine Damond was an Australian woman living in Minneapolis. This was about a year before, I think, George Floyd died. And so it's in the same city. And she hears screams coming from the apartment next door. So she calls the police. The black officer, Mohammed Noor, rolls up in the police car, says, right, I'm outside, come out. Justine Damond walks outside towards Mohammed Noor's cop car to report what she's been hearing. Mohammed Noor rolls down the window, points the gun at her, unloads the clip in her chest. Doesn't make no marches, no white squares, no riots. No, why are UAV posting about, pigs and gas chambers today? Didn't you know that Justine Damond has been murdered by the cops in cold blood? No one knows her name. And you know what's even crazier, Wayne? People were marching in Australia about George Floyd. They didn't even march for Justine Damond. She's an Australian national who is living in Minneapolis. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And I just want to bring up...
What's her name again?
Justine Damond.
Damond. Okay. And there's video footage of this?
There's no video footage, I don't think. Actually, so Mohammed Noor would have had his body cam on, I'm sure. So you probably can.
So someone should FOIA that, yeah. I mean, a lot of times cops turn off the body cam, so we might not have it. Well, if there's no video footage, that's one distinction, obviously, right? Because I think part of the reason George Floyd went viral is because we had such clear evidence of police misconduct that was just, to me, indisputable.
But then we've got video evidence though of Daniel Shaver being shot when he's on the floor, like begging and pleading with the police. No one talks about him.
I've seen that video footage. I know this is the guy who's like in a hotel and he's got like a toy gun in his hotel, like an air gun. Yeah, it's pretty disturbing footage, I will say. And it's really scary because he's on the ground, he's unarmed, just crawling to the police, and the police officers are like humiliating him, shaming him, and just making him feel like complete shit. Yeah. And then they just start shooting him for seemingly no reason. Oh, actually, the reason they shot him, I remember. Do you remember why they shot him? It's like super disturbing.
He wasn't going in the exact pose that they wanted him to pose in. He was like, right, put both hands on the floor or something, and he was. It's even worse than that. It's because he's like trying to do exactly what they're saying, and he's dragging himself because he's like on his belly, face first on the ground. So the story, for those of you who don't know this guy's story, which I'm pretty sure this is the right guy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a guy who was like playing with an air gun on his like hotel balcony. And I don't think he even pointed at anyone. I think he was just like holding it up there and like playing with it. But it was a very realistic looking gun. So someone calls the police and says, there's a guy with like an M16 or an AK-47 in this hotel room. A bunch of armed police come and they start screaming, escalate to like 1,000% right away, knocking on the hotel room. They're going to slam. They said, and they scream at him, come out of the room on your belly. And he's like crawling towards them. And they keep screaming and saying, because he's confused. And he does a couple things wrong initially, like, first they say, get on your knees, then they say, get on your belly, and they keep telling him to do different things. But as he's crawling towards them, his pants start falling off. And it's embarrassing and he's worried his pants are going to fall off and he's going to be like in his underwear or frankly, fully exposed. And so he just reaches back to try and pull his pants up and they start shooting him. That's it. Yeah.
So they're humiliating him. His pants are literally falling off to the point that he's exposed. And so he was basically shot and killed just because he was trying to pull his pants up.
Yeah, and it's
pretty disturbing.
I saw another video going around on X a few years ago because, thank goodness for X, you're actually seeing the things that the woke mob wouldn't want to show, i.e. white people instead of black people being killed by cops in just the most ridiculous circumstances. Like I saw this one of a white guy on the motorway in the States recently. He was clearly mentally deranged and he was holding like a stick. And he just raised it to the officer and he's walking slowly towards the officer. The officer again just like unloads the clip in his chest. This white dude like doesn't make the paper, no marches, nothing. Yeah. So there's this mentality in the US police force that if a suspect is white, I can get away with this. There's studies that actually show that police are more trigger happy on white suspects than they are black suspects. Because
no.
Well, hold on.
I don't believe this.
Well, okay.
Give me those studies.
All right,
give me those studies.
All right, hold on. I think I got one on my phone.
All right, send it to me. I'm skeptical.
All right, yeah, I can send it to you after the show, and maybe you can put them in the link. Whatever. But yeah, look. Wayne, let me put you in the police officer's shoes here. Let's say you're at police HQ and your radio buzzes. They say, Officer Hsiung, there's a man at the grocery store nearby. He's taking hostages and he's shooting at people out the window. Shoot to kill, shoot on sight. Now, Wayne, what colour do you hope the suspect is?
I mean,
you're a cop and you've got to shoot this guy.
I'm a cop?
Yeah, you're a cop and you have to shoot this guy. The police have told you shoot to kill.
Yeah, look, so as an individual, I don't care. Ideally, I don't care what color suspect he is.
Right.
I just hope I can stop him.
But
now, if you're trying to say psychologically, imagine myself being a cop, which is hard to imagine because I just can't imagine myself being a cop, to be honest. I'm not. Like, I am like, I don't know. I'm like the least authoritarian person. I mean, maybe not the least, but I'm not even, when I have kids, if I'm lucky enough to have kids, I know we're going to talk about this too. Yeah. I'm not even going to make my kids go to school. They're going to do whatever the hell they want. They can like run around naked in the streets for all I care. I mean, it's just, I want to have kids, but I believe in freedom. I believe people should be able to do whatever they want. And so like the idea of being a cop is so weird to me. I understand your point though. Your point is you're going to be a lot more afraid of potential consequences to you if the person's black or a person of color than a white person.
Yeah.
Is that what you're getting?
Yeah. If it was me and my radio buzzed, I would be on my knees praying the suspect is white and I have to shoot a white guy. Because it's not going to make the paper the next day. It's just going to be the next Justine Damond, right? If I shoot, though, the next George Floyd, next day in the newspapers, KK cop George Martin murders black man in cold blood. He was a loving member of his community. This guy was killing people. He was loved by all who knew him. He was taking hostages and he was shooting little kids in the head. The community is devastated after the racist white supremacist George Martin took his life without mercy. This is the exact kind of bullshit that I'd be in for. I would be lynched by the world's media the next day.
So here's, I'll make 2 points. A point in agreement is I do think the risks for a police officer in shooting in particular a black, not even a person of color, but specifically a black suspect are much greater. I also think that the risk for you as an officer, if you just do your job, is very, very low. There have been many instances where officers have been screamed at, have been accused of things. And there is a mob out there that will accuse you even if you do something that's, more justified. In cases where the shooting clearly was self-defense or defense of others, right? There was a shooting where, for example, I think it was in Wisconsin, where there was I think it was a black man or black woman who was like bringing a knife out and like literally stabbing someone. Mm-hmm. And the officer shot, I believe they killed, I think it was a woman. I forget if it was a woman or man, but it was a black woman or man.
Is it the one who killed the kid in the parking lot recently?
No, I haven't seen that one. I'm talking about this one. There's I think it's like 2 women out on a neighborhood and the cops come and one woman pulls a knife out and just like starts stabbing and attacking the other woman. And they shoot the woman. Might be the person I'm thinking of. I don't know. But the point is, I have not seen an instance. I personally think no one should go to prison. So I think that, maybe not no one, but I think it should be very, very rare circumstances where anyone goes to prison, because I think life in a cage is awful and it's like a form of torture that our future generations will see as the same way we see like drawing and quartering or, witch burning. I think it's barbaric that we put people in cages. And that's especially true in the United States, because we have the highest rate of per capita incarceration in the United States of any developed country in the world. In fact, we're worse than most undeveloped country. You look at Africa or Asia, you look at China, for example, all the people they put in cages and concentration camps. Our rate of incarceration is massively higher. Having said that, most of the cops that I've seen punished and placed in jail seem to have deserved some sort of accountability. And I haven't seen too many instances of cops being tarred and feathered who did not do something wrong. The penalty might have been worse than they should have received. Even Derek Chauvin. I think Derek Chauvin, I know this is a controversial statement, especially from people on my side of this issue, but does it really help the world to send someone into a cage for 20 plus years? I mean, the guy's been stabbed. He's falling apart. His family probably hates the Black Lives Matter movement. Everyone who knows him probably hates the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, an eye for an eye makes us all blind. Imagine a world where we certainly create some accountability. And I don't think that guy should have been in office. And if you look at his track record, that wasn't the first instance where he'd done something pretty bad to a person who he was supposedly protecting and serving. Should he be sitting in a cage for 20 years? Absolutely not. Did he deserve some sort of accountability? Absolutely yes. And I agree with you that it's unfortunate that cases where white people were victims of police misconduct were not getting the same attention than black people. My response to that is let's give attention to them all. Let's make sure everyone who's targeted with police misconduct or police brutality is given their day in court, is compensated for whatever harm they experienced. And yeah, let's fire those cops. And maybe in the worst cases, even, punish them criminally for what they did. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, it's just that I'm very, very skeptical about a lot of because I think the vast majority of shootings by police are justified, you see. I think that the public just makes a huge deal about them because we live in a society that glorifies criminals. And nothing showed that more than 2020, which was an absolute shit show. I mean, they've built statues of George Floyd, a man who used to go into people's houses and terrorize them at gunpoint in front of their children. This is the kind of man George Floyd was. And there's statues of him in the States. I mean, it's sickening. I mean, BLM, in my opinion, rightly tore down the statue of the slave trader in Bristol. That was one of the best things, in my opinion, BLM ever did, right? Tear that shit down. If there's a statue of a slave trader in the UK, get that shit down, right? So fair enough, they did that. Why aren't they tearing down the statue of George Floyd, though? A guy who used to go into people's houses and hold mothers up at gunpoint in front of their terrorized children.
You got to be the only person in the world who supported both tearing down the statues of the slave traders and tearing down the statue of George Floyd. Like, you're the weirdest dude. You got to be the weirdest dude I know. You just want to tear all the statues down, in other words.
Get them down.
George Martin just wants all the statues down. Can we at least put a statue of you up? Can we put a statue of you up and keep that one up?
Only if there's one of you as well. Only if there's one of you as well.
I definitely don't deserve to have my statue, so tear mine down. Like, if mine goes up, I'm going to join the mob and tearing mine down. Yeah, look, I don't think your points are ridiculous. I just think, why do you target BLM as a whole rather than just the worst aspects of it, right? Because if you agree, let's not venerate slaveholders, right? And maybe even if you agree, and I don't know if you agree with this, that there are at least some instances where cops are killing people and it shouldn't happen. And I think you agree with me,
Justine
Daniel
Damond
Shaver shouldn't have been killed.
Yeah.
Right? Justine Damond. Would you agree that George Floyd shouldn't have been killed?
Well, I don't think the cops killed him. I think he died of a fentanyl overdose.
Okay, I mean that strikes me as like borderline conspiracy theory, but
I think it's a conspiracy theory that the police killed him. I think it's the most successful conspiracy theory of all time.
Yeah,
a conspiracy
I haven't
theory.
I haven't done a deep dive into this, but I know the person who's been pushing this hardest is Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson believes a lot of weird shit. Like, he believes in like fairies and demons and stuff too. He's a weird dude who believes a lot of strange things. And for the record, I'm not saying everything Tucker Carlson says is wrong, because he's actually pretty pro-animal. He's been very, anti-vivisection, very anti-animal cruelty. But Tucker Carlson is not a credible assessor of the facts of a situation. And so you're saying he would have died, if not for the fact that Derek Chauvin kneels on the back of this guy's neck, you think this guy would have died anyways? So even if the cop hadn't arrested him that day, you think he was just on his way out that day?
That's exactly what the initial autopsy said, that he died of a drug overdose. That's what the drug expert said in court. It got amended, Wayne. The autopsy got amended to suit the narrative. Yeah. You didn't see that? So I actually looked at these documents, not recently, but I did look at these documents because I saw this stuff on Twitter and I'm like, all right, I got to go see it. So everyone agrees that the proximate cause, like that, maybe his cardiac issues, the fact that he was on, I think they found, I forget what drug he was on, but he was on some drug during this. Was it fentanyl? He had swallowed probably twice the lethal amount of fentanyl. And when they arrest him, if you watch, I think it's Lane's body cam footage, you see a white spot on his tongue. And he used to regularly swallow drugs during police stops to like hide them. And he told that he was shouting, "I can't breathe," before they even touched him. And he said, "I ate too many drugs."
Yeah, George, this is all true. Having said that, my understanding, and again, I might be wrong about this because I haven't looked at this recently because I had no idea we were going to even talk about this. Like, I thought we were going to talk about natalism and intersectionality, and instead we're arguing about BLM, which is great. But so I don't trust me 100% on this because I looked this a while back. My understanding is even the people who are the ones who say it was the drug overdose or it was the cardiac issues. Everyone agrees that the proximate cause, meaning the immediate thing that triggered his ultimate cardiac arrest and death, was, even if it was underlying conditions that were the root cause, if not for the fact. So there's this thing called but-for causality in the law. Have you heard about this before?
I don't think so.
It's basically what it sounds like. It's the concept that but for this person's actions, would this have happened? Right. And it's often used in the law to ask the question of causality, because causality is actually kind of complicated. Because causality, I mean, as a former social scientist, I could say causality is usually like, it's multi-causal. Everything is driven by a lot of factors. Like, why is the economy doing good today? There's not one factor that makes the economy good today or bad. Why did Trump get elected? You can't say it was just George Martin. I actually don't know if you supported Trump. I hope you didn't, because Trump has done some pretty awful things, including to animals.
I'm a UK citizen, so
I know, but you could still support Trump. So anyways, it doesn't matter. But it would, even if you did support Trump, it wasn't just George Martin. It's multi-causal. But one way to think about causality is, but for this person's actions, would the outcome have happened, right? And this is often used in the law to say, so say, for example, I hit you in the head. Say you have a rare biological genetic condition and your blood is just super thin. It just bleeds constantly. Your brain can't stop a bleed. And I hit you on the head, even with a plastic baseball bat, not a real one, a plastic one. I just hit you really hard. It is still the case that I caused your death. It might not be intentional homicide if I didn't intend to cause your death. But if I was reckless or negligent or intentional in trying to hurt you, but partly because of a pre-existing condition you have, you died, it's still considered a homicide and a crime. And my understanding of every autopsy of George Floyd is that even if he had some pre-existing conditions that may have been his own fault, drug overdoses, health conditions that, may have been the result of, frankly, prior drug use or poor just, health in general, the proximate cause, the but-for cause, the thing that immediately catalyzed his death on that day in Minneapolis was the fact for, 7-8 minutes or 14 minutes? I forget exactly how long, but Dave Chappelle's got an amazing bit on this. Someone was standing on the back of his neck. If not for the fact that he's got a knee on the back of his neck and he's going through an intensely painful, stressful situation and struggling to breathe and saying over and over again, I can't breathe.
Well, I think
that was Eric Garner who said that.
He was saying, I can't breathe before they touched him. He said, I can't breathe because he's just swallowed a lethal amount of fentanyl. Then the police have put him in a legal hold. It's called the maximal restraint or the hobble, which the police department of Minneapolis has been using for hundreds of years. And perfectly.
Well, maybe they should stop using it. But I don't think we have to litigate this, but I'm just pretty sure that if you look at even the autopsies on the anti-George Floyd side of this, they all say that the fact that he was put into restraint, the fact that someone was kneeling on the back of his neck for 14 minutes or however long it was, that was a cause of his death. If not for the fact that someone did that, he would not have died on that day. And I've heard the fentanyl thing. Look, I live in San Francisco where there are constantly people with elevated fentanyl levels. Having an elevated fentanyl level doesn't mean you're going to die every time. In fact, if that were the case, like every single person on the streets of San Francisco would be dead right now. Literally, I mean, I'm in San Francisco where we have a massive fentanyl problem, and the levels that you're talking about are levels that are routinely found in large numbers of people who do not die. So I just discount this idea that he would not have died, or he would have died if not for the fact that the police engaged in this misconduct. Well, more importantly, George, can you at least agree that there was no need to stand on the back of this guy's neck when he's crying for his mommy and he's not barely even moving for 14 minutes or however long it was? How long did he?
The procedure was called hold for EMT, and it was part of police procedure that they put someone in the hobble for until the ambulance arrives. So if you have a resisting suspect, you have to put them in the hobble or the maximal restraint. This guy, bear in mind, George Floyd is 6'4". The car's literally bouncing around. He's resisting them that much when they try to drag him out the car. He kicks Chauvin's badge off, so he's violently resisting. They put him in the same hole they put everyone else in, and yeah, he's swallowed a fuckload of fentanyl beforehand. He's going to die.
So we're probably not going to resolve, partly because we just don't have the evidence available in front of us, and neither of us is experts anyway. So even if we had the evidence, like, I don't know how to read fentanyl levels. I'm sure you don't know how to read fentanyl levels.
But the drug experts are, Wayne, and in the court case, they asked the drug expert, if you'd have turned up at someone's house and you'd have seen, and George Floyd was there as he was dead, what would you have assumed the cause of death was? And they'd have said, yeah, it's all the marks of a fentanyl overdose.
Well, you'd assume if you just saw someone lying in the ground, but if you had also heard, oh, this guy got kneeled on by a large man who for 8 minutes and 46 seconds was sticking his knee on the back of the guy's neck while he cried for his mom, I think you'd feel differently. I want to move on from the subject, but can you at least concede that what happened to George Floyd on that day was wrong, even if it wasn't murder?
No, not at all. If I ever, and I give police full permission to do this, if I ever try to pay something with a forged £20 note and then I resist arrest, I give them full permission to put me in the maximal restraint technique. You won't kill me.
But is it wrong?
No.
What happened on
I was trying to, if I'm trying to steal from a shop, I need to be arrested. If I then resist arrest, I need to be placed into the maximal restraint technique.
Bruh, I never want to cross you because you're going to kill me. Because if I cross you, apparently you're going to kill me. And I do not consent to you killing me. So someone's going to post tomorrow, Wayne consented to his homicide by George Martin when he stole $20 from him. I did not consent. It was not given. No. Okay. So I think I want to move on because I think that we talked a lot about where we disagree, and I think that's important because I think it's important to have like open disagreements in good communities, good movements. I want to talk about where we agree too, which is like we disagree about what happened to George Floyd. We disagree about the extent of systemic racism in the animal rights movement and beyond. I think where we agree is that the animal rights movement has been pretty devastated by intersectional infighting.
Yeah.
Would you say yes to that?
Okay. Of course you know.
Yeah. Okay. So, but now I'm gonna call you out a little, right? I know you've been calling other people. I'm gonna call you out. Right. I think part of the reason we've had so much intersectional infighting is because people like you won't give it up. Because I just think so. I mean, okay. So, for example, say you're right about all this stuff about George Floyd. Why do you feel it's so important for you to constantly litigate the issue rather than just say, look, I don't agree with you, but I still want to work together on animal rights stuff. So, and I think our focus should be the much greater atrocities against non-human animals. Because I think both of us would probably agree. I think you'll agree with this statement. No matter what injustices were inflicted in Minneapolis on that day, injustices towards Derek Chauvin, injustices towards George Floyd, injustices towards white people, injustices towards black people, towards Asian people, what happens to non-human animals in both scale and severity outweighs that by a huge margin. Like it's almost like an impossible to imagine margin just because of the sheer number and the sheer intensity of the suffering. Would you agree with that?
Of course. Absolutely.
Okay. So why do you always talk about George Floyd, bro?
So
why not talk about the animals more and George Floyd less?
So I think people would be, I don't mean to blow my own trumpet here, but I do think that I have had a positive impact in calling out the hypocrisy of intersectionality where it has actually held the movement back. I think if it weren't for my posts on this and my observations, a lot of people would be, because the cancel mob, they're very clever about how they manipulate people. So there needs to be people in the movement like me who make these observations that other people dare not even make, and actually prevent people from falling under their spell. Now, it's all well and good saying, oh, George, come on, you post about this kind of stuff so much. Why don't you post about this instead? And yeah, okay, I agree that I've been guilty of that sometimes. But I think most of the times when I've posted about intersectionality, and it's not just been an angry rant for like no reason with no actual, you know, when I have a well-intended post talking about all this stuff that's happened, I think it's helped people in the movement a lot to be like, damn, I hadn't noticed that actually. And to be fair, George has said that because a lot of other people were scared to say that. And I think it's actually helped keep our movement grounded. And actually, what's happened is, I think, I'm not putting this just down to me at all. I think there's many factors, but I think a lot of cancel culture in the movement has died down. And I think a lot of people have become aware of how these people operate. They've become aware of how woke cults manage to manipulate people, manage to scam people, and manage to screw over the animals. This is what I'm trying to do.
Why do you call it a woke cult? That makes it seem, and you say manipulation and scamming. Yeah. This makes it seem very intentional. And to me, it's just, isn't just this the story of human civilization and the human species that occasionally we get caught up in stuff and even with good intentions? Like my take on a lot of that stuff. So even specifically, like the amount of hate AV got for that post, I probably wouldn't have made that post. Having said that, I did think it was strange that an animal rights movement was cannibalizing one of its own organizations for pointing out that it was wrong to hold the severed head of a pig at a protest. I think it should be okay to say, this is wrong. This is wrong, it should stop.
Yeah.
And I thought the amount of attention that was given to that post by AV was disproportionate. And I did think there was like mob mentality because of, complicated reasons. Again, there wasn't a single cause. But you seem to think this mob mentality is triggered by a cult, by manipulation, by scamming, as opposed to people caught up with good intentions who, might be going too far on an issue, but otherwise are motivated to do some good in the world for people of color. No?
No, they didn't have good intentions. And a lot of people who were part of this bloodthirsty cancel mob, studies actually show that the kind of extremist far left activists are very likely to have what is known in psychology as the dark triad personality traits. So those are narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. And the reason that they virtue signal so hard is because they're immoral trash deep down. They're very hateful and disgusting people. They're not doing this because they care about black people or whatever it is. If they cared about black people, they'd be talking about the main cause of black people dying, which is black people killing each other, which makes the police killings of black people just microscopic. So if they truly cared about black people dying, they'd be focusing on the 100 murders of black people in a single weekend in Chicago. These people, they enact these mob attacks because of their own hatred. They hate white people. They're speciesists. They want to parade people's head around like a trophy and say, I cancelled this person, because they're losers in life who have never achieved anything. So they want to elevate themselves by saying, I'm the person who did this. I'm the person who destroyed this organization. They're deeply embedded in a cult, and I've talked at length about this before. I've made posts about why they're a cult. Me and David Rams did a really good stream on it as well. But think about what the hallmarks of a cult are. So you have groupthink mentality, where anyone who strays from the narrative of the cult, there immediately it's not like, oh, agree to disagree. You're now like they tarnish you with this. You disagree with this, you are now the worst thing in the world. And they control the people's lives. They say stuff like, you're not allowed to hang around with this person. Wayne, you're not allowed to have a podcast with this person. You dump your racist quote unquote boyfriend. They never say dump your non-vegan boyfriend. They always say dump your racist boyfriend, because they only care about that kind of stuff.
They sometimes say dump your non-vegan boyfriend.
Not those people. No, the legit hardcore activists say it. I've not seen the mob who attacked AV in 2020. Okay. They were just they're
not saying dump your non-vegan boyfriend.
Exactly, They were dating. Not loads of them were dating non-vegans. There was this one girl who made a flipping spreadsheet of all the organizations who hadn't spoke out for Black Lives. Dude, you look on her profile, she's got nothing there about animals. And she's dating a non-vegan guy. It's a load of shit, mate. And then people have
done the same with Gaza recently too.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Like they basically list out all the organizations that haven't made a statement on Gaza. And if you haven't made a statement, you're clearly racist. You're Islamophobic. It's too much.
And then obviously another trait of cults is financial exploitation. So obviously BLM, who ran off with all that money, intersectionals didn't even call that out. They talked about AV earning $100,000 every 6 weeks or something, but they didn't
But
talk about.
the woke mob that's attacking AV. You think they're doing this for money? What money are they getting out of attacking AV?
Well, there's actually they were funneling money into BLM for them to spend on their mansions and not hold them accountable for that. So
no, but not the activists who are attacking AV. These aren't like the leaders of BLM.
No,
these are just like random people on Facebook.
Hold on, Wayne. They were telling vegan sanctuaries. They were cancelling vegan sanctuaries for not donating to BLM. They were telling They were funneling money out of the animal rights movement and into BLM. And
not the individuals who are complaining about this stuff. It's not the idea that there's some cult that's trying to financially exploit.
It was all
the
part
animal
of
rights
the same.
activists.
It's all part of the same religion, mate. Those people cancelling AV over that, they're part of BLM. They're part of that whole movement. It's all about funneling money away from animal rights into BLM for them to spend on their mansions and swimming pools. And then you have the microcosm cult versions of that. Wayne, I just want to tell you about a deeply disturbing story in the animal rights movement that is... that goes to show about the financial manipulation that happens within woke cults. There was one of these vegan girl groups on Facebook. There was a black girl in it who was she was manipulating all the white members to send her money for cinema tickets and stuff every week. And if you dared challenge it, you were racist. So she was doing this whole reparations thing. So she was like, hey, me and my boyfriend are going to the cinema tonight. Could any of the white group members in the group please send me some money? And all the girls in it, the white girls were like, yes, please just give me your PayPal and I'll send you some money. I'm so sorry for what my ancestors did.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that as some sort of cult or manipulation. I mean, that is, I've seen that sort of behavior, and I think that is just human beings being shitty to each other. I mean, in every dynamic, so in a law firm, the partner that has more power is going to use it, or at least unethical partners will use it against the associates who have less power. In a church, the pastors who have more influence may manipulate some of the individuals who are involved to give them more money or resources. And it's just the fundamental problem of power anywhere. And it's true that on the left, if you're a black woman, you would have more power in a lot of ways. And so there were lots of individual cases where a particular black person probably did manipulate a particular white person. This idea that there's this mass cult where people are trying to manipulate large numbers of people intentionally to extract their money, especially in the context of these disputes involving animal rights, because frankly, there's not even that much money involved in animal rights. If you were trying to manipulate people and get money out of them, you wouldn't target AV. I mean, AV never had a big budget in the first place. You got to be the dumbest cult, manipulator in the world to say we're gonna get all the followers of AV to donate to us instead. It's AV never had that many followers or money in the first place. It's what a terrible idea.
No, but
I think the better explanation. Let me just finish the thought. I think the better explanation is. What we've seen in many contexts through human history, which is that human beings are highly social animals. We don't recognize how social we are. And when there's momentum in a particular idea, good or bad, sometimes those ideas are good ideas. Like the civil rights movement in the 1960s was a good social mob. I mean, it was a mob in a sense, but we don't call it a mob. We call it a movement because they had good objectives. They were trying to prevent discrimination and allow black people and Chinese people and other people into the country and into schools and on buses, right? But it was basically the same psychological forces, and it's the same psychological forces that cause people to do awful things too. But the idea that there's some sort of cult or manipulation, I mean, I just think that defies reason, because you would see more evidence of this. There would be more evidence showing that, for example, where are the receipts? Where are the documents showing people saying, man, we should really go after these AV folks because we don't actually think they're racist at all, and we don't care about racism one way or the other. We just want to get their money. There's no evidence. Show us the receipts.
Financial exploitation is only just one trait of cults. But bear in mind, Wayne, people who are in cults don't realize that they're in a cult. They see it as the truth. They see it as the light. They see them as themselves. They might see themselves as doing a good thing, but it's usually deep down these people are deeply immoral people. And they're easily manipulated people. I mean, let me look at the traits of a cult here, and we'll go. Yeah. Okay, look at this. Okay, number one.
Everybody accuses me of being a cult leader, right, George?
Well, we're vegans. We get that bullshit all the time. I mean,
but specifically Direct Action Everyone. Everyone says DXE was a cult, and I was running it, and But maybe part of the reason I'm pretty skeptical of this is because everyone says like Wayne's got all these Mercedes. They claim I've like trafficked women. Like I've had relations with like 4 women in the last 10 years. I literally lost all my money. I had like $500,000 in the bank when we started DXC. I donated all the money to DXC. I sleep on the floor of a living room and I'm bankrupt now. And just there's so much falsehood out there, including falsehood about you. Like I would love to create a movement where we're more connected to reality and we assume good faith in one another, including when there's disagreements. And I don't like it when people attack you, but I also don't like it when you attack other people. And I know you're not attacking a particular individual or attacking kind of a group of people or a mentality, but I still think this stuff just like divides us even more, right? When you accuse people who, because I guarantee you, I have good friends who believe some of the things that you condemn as like these terrible, awful beliefs for the animal rights movement or for the world at large. And I guarantee you they're not doing it for financial gain. They're not doing it for control. They're not doing it because they have narcissistic personality disorder. They're doing it because they want to help black people. And I think that's like a good thing to want to help other human beings and other animals.
So,
yeah.
I should clarify, not everyone,
Okay, please.
Not everyone who supports, the BLM movement or anything or so-and-so is a cult member. But there were I'm talking specifically about the woke cult who engage in this behavior. By the way, I also want to say, not everyone on the left is woke. What I mean, as in the pejorative woke. Most people on the left are just good, decent people who care about racial equality, who care about sexism, homophobia, all this kind of things, right? When we refer to woke cultists, we're talking about a specific sect of the extreme far left who are personality disorder riddled maniacs whose goal it is to cancel people, to destroy people's lives, who are under the spell of a charismatic leader who wants their money and they might not even realize it. Patrice Cullors, sorry. Patrice Cullors, the leader
Who's
of BLM. The leader of BLM
the
sitting
person
in
who had
her
all those mansions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that did seem pretty troubling to me.
Yeah, and why haven't they cancelled her, Wayne? Why haven't the same people who shout at DXC or AV for getting money in the animal rights movement, where is their outrage at BLM for getting all this money? If their outrage, which is stupid anyway, by the way, because if you support a group, you should want them to get money. But they support that when it's BLM, to the extent that the leader can just splash the money on mansions and swimming pools. But if DXC dares get a fucking peanut, a crumb from a donor, Wayne Hsiung is embezzling money from the movement or whatever it is. These people are just deeply speciesist and they are in a cult, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with that. I think within BLM, I saw a lot of people within BLM. I didn't remember her name, but this Patrice Cullors woman, there are a lot of people within BLM who are really upset about this too. I mean, didn't like Sean King go after her? Like a bunch of like leaders in BLM went after her too. So it's not like, I don't know. I mean, I just think, granted, I understand you're talking about a relatively small subset of the left. You're not talking about everyone on the left. Because I mean, a lot of my friends, including me, support a lot of the things that you say are cult activities or cult thinking.
And so do I.
So
this is the distinction I want to draw, Wayne. I'm a centrist, right? So I have a mixture of left and right wing principles. So
what are your left wing principles?
Free healthcare, support gay marriage and gay adoption. What else? To be honest, it's very hard now to...
Climate change? Are you an environmentalist?
I'm not an environmentalist, but I acknowledge that climate change is real.
Mm-hmm. And caused by humans?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, with this whole left-right thing, it's hard to even say what left-wing views are anymore, because I think Dave Rubin put it brilliantly. He said, it's now become a conservative principle to defend liberal values. I mean, freedom of speech was allegedly a left-wing idea. Now I think it's the right who are the champions of that.
Well, anti-war sentiment too. I'm kind of stunned by how many people on the left are very pro-war in a lot of ways, and
who absolutely cuck to Hamas and Hezbollah as well. I mean,
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm not as sure about that. I think that is not surprising to me, and I think it's like a more nuanced, complicated situation. Not that October 7th wasn't like a horrific atrocity, but I don't think it's as simple as like the left is cucking to Hamas. I mean, I think it's complicated. I think
certain people
it's
on
like
the left.
it's so. For example, well, certain people probably are, but I like a lot of statements made by people on the left are something akin to what Martin Luther King Jr. said about violence in the civil rights movement. Which Martin Luther King Jr. said is like basically said, well, one of the reasons you should respond to the nonviolent activism is because if you don't, someone with a Molotov cocktail is going to come. Like the nonviolent activists, we're the ones who actually believe in you, who want to work together to make a better place. And our civilization will collapse. Our society will collapse if you do not work with the people who actually have a good faith belief in our ability to collaborate. And that's very different from saying, I think it's great for people to come with a Molotov cocktail. He's just saying, he's making a prediction. He's not saying it's the right thing to happen. And I think a lot of people on the left say things like, well, yes, if you occupy a people and you impose, essentially apartheid, which I think, I don't see how anyone could argue what's happening in the West Bank isn't some form of apartheid. I mean, maybe it's even justified apartheid, but it's certainly apartheid. There's race-based classifications that allow you to move, that give you access to water, all these things. But a lot of people on the left will say things like, look, something like Hamas is going to be inevitable when you occupy people for many decades and you impose intense forms of racial segregation on them. And that is very different from saying, I'm cooking for Hamas, or I think what Hamas did is okay on October 7th, right? Those are different positions. I'm not saying there aren't also people who say what Hamas did on October 7th was resistance and great. But to me, the dominant position on the left, and I'm pretty close to a lot of people who organize for pre-Palestine, is not that what Hamas did is great on October 7th. It's that is going to happen when you occupy people. And this is exactly why we need a peace process,
Yeah, there might be a lot of people on the left who have a much more reasoned and nuanced position on that. But I've had some extremely disturbing and chilling conversations with a significant number of vegans who support Hamas and who fully. And this is one of the weird. This is why you asked me a moment ago. You said, George, what are your left-wing principles? And I said, actually, it's hard to even say what these are these days because I'm a firm believer in horseshoe theory. A lot of the people who are like, I'm anti-fascist, I'm against Nazism, they're teaming up with Nazis on this and they support Hezbollah, who literally do the Nazi salute. What does it even mean to be an anti-fascist? What does it even mean to be an anti-capitalist now if you support BLM, which capitalizes on the deaths of black people? What even are these left-wing principles these days? I don't even know.
And the horseshoe theory basically meaning, can you describe that to people what the horseshoe theory is?
Yeah, so generally, without horseshoe theory, the misconception, I'd say, is that the far left and the far right are totally opposites of one another. Horseshoe theory, which I believe is the valid political theory, is that the far left and the far right are closer to each other than the center left or whatever, because the further you go to the left, the closer you are to the far right. It curves like a horseshoe in that they believe in kind of the same things. So anti-Semitism, massive violent authoritarianism, cancelling of free speech, my way or the highway kind of logic, persecution of certain groups. So we're talking about the specific extreme far left and far right. They're actually very similar to each other.
Yeah.
It's about
I think you're right about this, but my take on this horseshoe theory is the extremism of the far left and far right that matters for horseshoe theory isn't actually ideological. It's like psychological, right? It's because they could have very moderate policy positions, and still that convergence would happen if you have a particular psychology. Namely, some of the psychological attributes you describe, like Machiavellianism, that I'm going to use people for my purposes and take power to achieve my objectives. Narcissism, I'm the only one who matters, no one else matters. You could endorse a very centrist policy on healthcare and say in the United States, I believe in Obamacare or whatever it is, or even just, I believe in a corporate health insurance policy supported by, tax deductions or tax write-offs. But if you're such an asshole that you literally try to cancel and destroy everyone who disagrees with you, in many ways, and this actually relates to something else you find in social movement research. One fascinating thing about social movement research that it's funny because so much of what activists try to do is they try and create coalitions around ideology. They try and say let's just include everyone. If we include, Black Lives Matter and women's rights and gay rights and animal rights and climate change, then we'll all be a huge, big movement. turns out that doesn't work out very well. And there's pretty good evidence on this, because it turns out that the more movements you include in the coalition, it's like a Venn diagram where, you know, you have all these intersecting circles, and if everyone has to believe in every movement, eventually you come across some movement that someone doesn't believe in. And if you're going to impose a litmus test and say everyone who's a part of this has to believe in all these things, well, just mathematically, the more things you add to the list, the more likely it is that someone is going to not believe in one of them, and then they get kicked out. But the area where this intersection does actually work a lot is tactical agreement. It's funny that oftentimes movements that otherwise have no ideological sympathy, if they agree about tactics, like we just all believe in like fucking shit up, or we all believe in lobbying, or we all believe in nonviolent protest, there's like a synergy that comes with that. And I find this to be true for direct action stuff, for example. Like it's weird how much alignment you have with someone just because they understand what nonviolent direct action is, how civil disobedience works, you know, how to do a jail support campaign, stuff like that. And I think part of the reason horseshoe theory happens is there's some people who just want to burn everything down. And it doesn't even matter what it is. They just want to burn it down. And they have a lot they agree with because they just like burning stuff down. Does that sound correct to you, or do you disagree with that?
Yeah, you might need to clarify exactly what you mean. So
I mean, it's not even about ideology. I think you're right that there's like horseshoe theory, that there's like extremists on the left and the right who are causing a lot of problems. I just don't think it has to do with the extremism, their ideology. It just has to do with the people who have a psychological trait that they want to burn everything down end up coming together because they just like want to burn everything down.
Yeah, it might be something that I have to look more into. I don't know. I haven't come across this theory before, but it could be the case that, yeah, there are a lot of bad actors within certain sects of the movement. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Well, anyways, what were we talking about? We were talking about, I guess, to wind back to where I was basically saying, look, if you want people to unify about animal rights, why do you talk about this intersectionality stuff? And your response was, well, I talk about this because there are certain flaws that need to be pointed out. And this is where I agree. And I don't necessarily agree with your particular critique, but I do agree that there are certain situations, including that AV situation, where the animal rights movement was getting a lot of out of control in terms of its like, I don't think it was a cult. I don't think it was done for financial exploitation. I think it was normal social forces that cause human beings to do weird things. I did think it was incredibly counterproductive for animals. And I will say, my diagnosis of the problem is not so much that there's a woke mob, people trying to manipulate, or people with dog triad personality disorders, because I know of a lot of people who, none of those things were true of, who participated in, for example, going after AV. This is like, when, in 2021? Was this when this was happening? Or 2020? 2020? Okay. My diagnosis of the problem is that we do not have either the individual relational skills or the collective norms to encourage constructive disagreement. I will say we need two things. One is we have to understand the importance of solidarity, right? And solidarity in coalitions are about coming together when you disagree. Like, you wouldn't need solidarity. You wouldn't need a coalition if we agreed about everything, because then we just agree about everything. The entire point of a movement is binding people together who otherwise have some disagreements. Because you and I are not the same person. We live in different continents. We have different accents. We have different beliefs. Part of the reason it's important for us to connect with each other is because we share something that's very crucial, which is a commitment to defending animals from the atrocities being inflicted on them. Yeah. And we have to center that. We have to make that very, very important in our scheme and our priority of things to accomplish in the world, our priority scheme in terms of just like what's important for me to focus on. But the second thing is realizing, look, one, that is important. But second, there will be many other things where we don't agree on, and we've got to find a way to work it out. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation, because, I mean, hopefully everyone who's listening to this conversation recognizes you and I don't agree about a lot of stuff, including like deeply held ethical convictions. Like, I'm literally a person of color who believes systemic racism is a problem and has had my face sliced open by someone calling me an ugly chink. That literally happened to me. I had to go to the ER. I had to get my face stitched back together.
Yeah, and by the way, I hope the same thing happens to that guy, by the way. So
I don't. I hope he's like a very happy person. I hope he's in good shape. I hope he's learned from that experience. because he did get suspended from school. The most messed up thing about that experience, well, not the most messed up, but one of the messed up things about that experience is I actually got suspended too because I just fought back. I was just defending myself. And they took me out of school for 2 weeks. They took him out of school for 4 weeks. But anyways, I mean, we disagree about all these things. But the way we handle this disagreement is, one, we have a conversation about it like this, where we assume some degree of good faith. I believe you're not acting badly. And I hope you believe the same about me. I don't think you think, or at least I don't think you think, that I'm some sort of asshole who's like part of a woke mob who's trying to cancel you. Partly because I'm not trying to cancel you, right? I'm literally platforming you.
No, you're everything. Like you are a shining example of what people on the left should be. You're having a conversation with me about. I haven't even. I don't give a shit. I've enjoyed the conversation.
It's been a good conversation. I agree. Yeah. And I've learned some things, like even about this. What's her name? Justine Damond person. I mean, I'm going to look it up. I had no idea about this person. I'm going to watch the video footage and I'll give my assessment to you afterwards, like by email or by signal. But we just have to be able to have these constructive disagreements. And this is not just, a lot of people say like, oh, well, you're just like a wimp. You can't fight with the right wingers or whatever. It's like, no, I'm willing to fight. Like literally, I've risked my life repeatedly for animals. I've risked my freedom for animals. I've been to jail for animals. It's not because I don't have the courage to fight right wingers. It's that if we are actually going to help animals, we need everybody to be involved. And there's evidence on this, right? That
which
big
is more
inclusive movements.
Which is more than any of these fuckheads who joined in the cancel campaign, who you go on their profiles, they've just got a load of cupcake recipes and they're there talking about, why are you talking about animal rights today? Why haven't you apologized for that post about George Floyd or whatever the hell it is? It's like, mate, I've looked on your profile. You don't have a single post about animals, and you're coming after animal rights activists to get them. And then there are people like yourself, Wayne, who is on the left and who agrees actually with the movement that these people were kind of trying to pressure people into donating to, whatever. But you actually do stuff for animals. You don't engage in this cancerous, like, cancel culture, this hateful vitriol that we saw. So they should take a leaf out of people like your book, though you agree with their movement and you actually help animals and you don't cancel people.
I think this is actually a pretty astute observation you're making, and it's an important one. And it's not just true of animal rights activists, it's true of all the movements. In my experience, for example, the black people who have been incarcerated unjustly, who have gone through enormous suffering and have sacrificed and risked a lot for themselves. Even King himself, like King literally was killed, right? Yeah. He was killed for his activism. And one of the things he always said was, we have to have everyone as part of our community. He had this concept of the beloved community, which is kind of, it's like a little hippie and everyone's like, oh, beloved community, you love everyone, kumbaya. But there's actually some merit to the idea that, when they won civil rights in the United States, it's not perfect, obviously, and there's still a lot of problems, but no one can argue this was not a monumental accomplishment. I mean, the very existence of my family in this country is because of the civil rights movement. Before 1965 in the INA, it was illegal for Chinese people to come to this country. There was a very, very strict quota. We couldn't even come into this country. My dad was like a top chemistry grad student in Taiwan, at the best university in Taiwan. He wouldn't have even had the opportunity to come here for grad school and contribute immensely to the United States, if not for the civil rights activists. But one of the reasons they won, one of the reasons they got to the place where they could help people like my family, is because they included people who disagreed with them. And that even included racists. They even included people who were racist in their movement. So, and the best example of this, and I've given this before, is Martin Luther King Jr. worked with Lyndon B. Johnson. And people don't know that Lyndon B. Johnson was a Southern white senator who literally used to have a snake in his trunk to scare black people. He would tell stories about this. Yeah. Because he believed there's this weird kind of conspiracy theory among white people in the South that black people were scared of snakes and they were all criminals and dangerous people. But if you have a snake in your trunk, they'll run away. This is how racist this dude is. He's got a snake in his trunk to scare black people. And then he is exactly the person Martin Luther King Jr. tries to work with to pass groundbreaking civil rights legislation in 1964. Right? That is the opposite mentality. Yeah.
Martin Luther King would be rolling in his grave if he saw the modern woke movement. He would.
I agree. He would.
His quote was, "I have a dream that one day people will be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. That includes everybody. Like, that even includes white people. That even includes the race that was persecuting him. That when you look at me, for example, you don't judge me because of my skin color. You don't say George Martin he's the descendants of a slave master or something like that. You judge me for the content of my character. He was talking about everyone when he said that. Now, what do we see in the animal rights movement? Not so much as we did back in the days when it was really bad. As I say, this kind of stuff, as the Overton window have shifted and people are seeing how crazy these people are. But back in 2020, for example, cis white male scum, kill all white men, blah, blah, blah. And this is why it's crazy to me, Wayne. Americans keep saying, how did Trump win? I don't understand how Donald Trump won. Dude, What do you mean, how did Trump win? Who do you think someone is going to vote for in America when a white man, just a good, decent person who happens to be a white man? Who do you think they're going to fucking vote for when they log onto Facebook one day and they see a status from some, like, fucking lunatic studying gender studies at the University of Berkeley or something, kill all cis white men? Who do you think that person is going to vote for?
Yeah. There's truth to this. And there's, and and I think you're right that too often there were people with these dark triad personality characteristics in the left, right? They did not have the ML King mentality of let's bring everyone together. Let's confront injustice, but have love even for our adversaries, right? And that's really hard. Yeah. It's hard to do. But instead, we not only do we not do that. I mean, I think that's really hard, and most people honestly need years of meditation and training and discipline to get to the point where they can be as courageous as King was in terms of both confronting injustice while still maintaining nonviolent discipline, even having compassion for the people who literally arresting him and throwing him in jail and sometimes killing him and his family members and his friends. But the left over the last 10 years has gone in the opposite direction, where not only do they have compassion for their adversaries, they literally try to destroy anyone who's even part of their coalition who has a slight disagreement with them, right?
Yeah.
And they do this without any connection to reality about what actually helps the movement succeed. Like, the left became very disconnected from the real world. And part of this was just the inability to dissent. Like, if you cannot dissent, you cannot remain detached to reality. If it becomes so forbidden to say certain words, and not even dramatically different words from the words of people around you. I mean, just slight deviations are going to be punished to the point you cannot say them. And this happened to me so many times. Like, so for example, it sounds like we're on different sides of this issue, but on the Free Palestine debate, merely because I said, I am not sure this is a genocide. I think there were crimes being committed, but genocide has a specific legal and cultural connotation. And particularly since I have Jewish friends, I want to be sensitive to their concerns about the misuse of this term, because even in the context of animal rights, I think sometimes people probably say things that maybe aren't the most sensitive, and maybe you don't care about that as much as I do. I do care about it. But I was still, in general, I was fully supportive of a ceasefire. I'm fully supportive of the idea that there's an occupation in Palestine. Merely for not being willing to say that word clearly and definitively, there are people who accuse me of hating Palestinian children. Hating Palestinian children. I was like, whoa, come on there. That's a little bit of a logical leap. Just because I don't want to say for sure this is a genocide, I now hate Palestinian children. That just seems a little much,
Which is number 5, Wayne, of this list of cult traits that I've got up in my other tab here. Number 5.
What is 5?
No tolerance for questions or critical inquiry. So this is another way that they operate. It's like, if you dare even question something, you can be on their side. You can be on board. Yeah, if you just say, I support you guys, go, however, I don't agree with it. You now, Wayne, are a genocider. That's how cults operate. So they have all the hallmarks, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but I just don't think that's not primarily a product of cult mentality. It's a product of social movements and social forces. It's funny. I almost think it's the product of anti-cult mentality, in the sense that I think part of the reason that sort of stuff happens is because there isn't sufficient leadership on the left to control it, right? You have a room of people, all of whom care about Palestine, all of whom care about Black Lives Matter. And frankly, when those sorts of things happen, my experience is everyone in the room kind of realizes, whoa, that's too much. But there's no one who feels they have sufficient leadership credibility to step in and say like, hey, folks, I understand everyone's really emotional about this, but I think we need to all stay together. Let's try and work together and not accuse each other of things, not make like logical and factual leaps like that to the point that just because someone disagrees with a particular characterization of a particular act, they now are a racist who literally hates children of a certain race, right? That can't be the case. And there's just no one who can step in and do that. And I think that's one of the antidotes to these problems and movements, that we need to develop a larger base of leaders who are supported with norms, with trainings, so that when stuff does go a little sideways, as happened in this particular context. And in that context, I mean, frankly, that context, it's not even a very good example because, I think it's okay for people to go after me. I am a leader, and I'm a big boy. I can defend myself. I don't need anyone to support me. I think the problem with that interaction is it showed there were many other small interactions that were happening where someone didn't have the power and strength and confidence to push back at all. Because when that happened to me, it's not like I left the movement. I've continued to do my activism, and it hasn't really affected me that much. I mean, I guess it has. Well, that's not true. It has affected me, but mostly because various people basically left the work I was doing because they felt like I wasn't strong enough on both sides. It's kind of like with that dispute, it's like people on both sides are upset because I'm not strong enough on one side, I'm not strong enough on the other, and so people on both sides are leaving. But it didn't affect me that much in terms of my ability to continue activism.
And you've got to remember, Wayne, the people who enact these things are bullies, mate. They prey on weak targets. So the fact that you've stuck up for yourself, as I have, it makes harder targets for them. They like to prey.
Bullies.
Of course they are. Look at how they act. They gang up and dogpile on people to try to get them to conform to their mob mentality.
I think they're almost anti-bullies. I think the people who do this most are the people who strike me as being the most fragile. Like they. Well, yeah, they don't.
But people who were bullied go on to become bullies.
That's true. Yeah, no, that's true. But then there's a different solution, right? If someone is just like a monster and a dark triad personality who's Machiavellian and trying to secure power for themselves, then I think the solution is probably just to exclude from the movement entirely. And say like, look, someone who has a dark triad personality characteristic, I mean, they might still be able to do stuff for animals, but they're just not going to do stuff collaboratively very, very well because they're constantly going to center attention on themselves. They're going to try and seek power. They're going to try and destroy other people. And that's counterproductive behavior. But for the vast majority of people here you're describing, including a lot of people who went after AV, I won't put their names out. I've got a lot of friends who used to be part of that mob who now realize it's not good, right? And we're no longer doing those things. And if we had, but if we had ascribed to them these characteristics, if we had said these are bullies, these are narcissistic dark triad personality characteristic type people, rather than saying, look, these are people who are just like caught up in something in the way all of us get caught up. I mean, like I got caught up in The Lion King last week and was listening to it constantly in a way that irritated everyone around me. Hopefully no one hates me for it. I just got a little caught up in The Lion King. I was like singing Hakuna Matata all day. Human beings have this tendency. We get caught up in shit that annoys the people around us. And that is a very different diagnosis to the problem than narcissistic bullies who are woke mobs who are trying to hurt people. I don't think these people are trying to hurt anyone. I think they're just caught up in something in the way that all of us get caught up in stuff sometimes. And then, when they reflect more, at least the good people amongst them, when they reflect more, realize, oh, I kind of got caught up in something and that was a little too much.
Well, they're ultimately under people, like there can be some well-meaning people who join these mobs who were just caught up, they were under their spells. This is how these groups, they're very good at preying on people and getting them to join in their mob attacks. And they prey a lot on kind of easily mentally manipulated individuals who can be bullied and coerced into, because they don't want to be the next one out of line. This is why I've never joined in on one of these current thing attacks, because I'm not scared to be cancelled or whatever about whatever it is. If I don't agree with something, I'll just say it.
Why aren't you scared?
Because there's a saying, Wayne. Thanks. I would rather be hated for someone I am than loved for someone I'm not. I want to be the authentic me. I don't want to just join in one of these join in on one of these mobs, these bloodthirsty mobs who violate all the principles that I have and believe and are pushing an agenda that I don't even agree with and are pushing false narratives and conspiracy theories in my eyes, just because I don't want to be the next one in line to get cancelled by them. I'd rather be cancelled.
Yeah. How do you think you develop that confidence? Because that's pretty rare.
Oh, I don't think it ever developed. I think maybe it's just, I think I almost see it as natural for being a vegan. I think the part of the reason that people who go vegan is because we weren't scared to be the odd one out at school, were we? Maybe you were like I think most vegans that you talk to, we might have been one of the more different kids at school. We might have been a bit weird in some way compared to other people. A lot of people think I'm autistic, by the way, but I'm actually not. I had an actual.
That's mean. Yeah, I should say that. That's
so many people thought it that I decided to actually get a diagnosis recently. And it turns out that I'm not. But put it this way, I've always been unusual compared to the majority of people, and that's because humans are very social animals and we're very conformist animals. You know, we have this insult, oh, you people are a bunch of sheep, whatever. No, the term should be you're a human. You're a bunch of humans. You followed along in the mob. Whereas I've not been
in our inability to comply, we are far, far, far beyond sheep.
Yes,
we comply in ways that a sheep would never comply.
Because, dude, think of the social pressures that there are against being vegan. Just this thing that so many people are already in their heart. I mean, I do a lot of street outreach, and most of the time I don't even need to argue with people. They agree with every single thing I say. Do you think this is wrong? Yeah, it is. Do you think we need to eat animals in this day and age? No, we don't. Do you think this is an injustice? This is oppression? Yeah, it absolutely is. Most people are saying that when I talk to them, but they're not doing it. Why are they not doing it? Because they just want to conform to what their family does and what the government thinks is okay. They don't want to be the odd one out at the work dinner party. You know, whereas people like me and yourself, Wayne, and all the people listening to this podcast, we're the ones who are okay with being the odd one out at in the office, or the only vegan in the family, or the person who is saying something is wrong that the law says is okay. So I think that's just the kind of people we are naturally. And I find it kind of shameful when vegans do join in on these mob attacks. But here's the thing, Wayne, I don't think a lot of those people are even vegan. And I think actually a lot of them will be ex-vegans in a few years. Because I think narcissism is prevalent among activist ex-vegans.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually think that there is some truth to the idea that a lot of the most intersectional vegans do kind of give it up, because it's just, to me, it's something about the prioritization of other issues, right? It's just, animal rights is just like not central to their identity in any way.
They will always choose in any scenario where humans are pitted against animals in some kind of way, they will always choose the human, because it's racist not to. It's, you're a colonizer, you're anti-indigenous if you choose the animal rights over the indigenous seal hunt or whatever it is. So it's like they will always pick the human.
Yeah, I mean, to steel me on the other side of this, I mean, the argument you hear a lot is that, look, we're trying to build as much power as possible, so to change the world. And if we're going to do that, we need to include the perspectives of various stakeholder groups. In a coalition, you've got people of color, you've got LGBT people, you've got women, you've got workers, whatever it is. We got to hear everyone out and make sure the movement is fulfilling their interests and goals too, right? And that there's a certain logic to that, right? That this idea that movements involve some degree of reciprocity, that we give a little and then we take a little, that sort of thing. Or maybe it's not even that transactional. Maybe it's more just a sense of solidarity that's created from hearing everyone and supporting everyone's goals.
Yeah.
I think I'm not even necessarily saying I disagree with it. I think the problem with that mentality is when it becomes a sword rather than the shield, when it becomes exclusive rather than inclusive. So my general take on that is, of course it's good for us to hear out everyone. Of course it's good for us to create a big tent. But the way intersectionality is often practiced is that it's a tool of exclusion. It's not a tool of inclusion, right? It's not being used to say like, hey, dude, it's kind of messed up. Like, why are we not letting black people in this space? Of course we have to let black people in this space. Black people have a lot to contribute. And it's like super messed up that you don't want black people or gay people. Like, you're not comfortable as a gay person? Well, tough luck, you know? Like, we welcome gay people in this movement. We welcome trans people in this movement. Like, these people, there's not a lot of vegans, there's not a lot of animal rights supporters. We got to include them. And too often what intersectionality actually is, it's like, even against people of color, even against LGBT people, like the LGBT person, this has literally happened in our local community. Like an LGBT person who says something like, well, I don't know if I want to defund the police. Like, I kind of feel like the police are necessary for our protection. And they're out. You know, it's like, you're gone, leave. And it's like, it doesn't matter they're LGBT anymore. Or like a person of color who says like, oh, I don't know if like we can kick everyone out the moment they're accused of sexual harassment. Maybe we need some sort of due process. It's like, you're black, but you hate women. You know, you want due process? Don't you know about Believe Women? You're out too. And it's like, so again, it's like intersectionality is used as a tool to kick everyone out to the point that we have no one left.
Right, they want right. The idea that what they're trying to say, intersectionality is a way of expanding the movement and making it inclusive. It will make it the smallest, most microscopic movement in history. And
well, that's because it's the way it's practiced, though, isn't it? It's not intersectionality per se. It's about the way it's being implemented.
Well, I think in any case, it would result in a small. I guess it depends on which definition that we're using here. If we're going by the Kimberly Crenshaw definition, which is just talking about more a description of something rather than some kind of ideology, then sure. The way intersectionality in the vegan movement is practiced, it's actually...
Wait. Did George Martin just say you support Kimberly Crenshaw? For those of you who don't know, Kimberly Crenshaw is literally the scholar who invented intersectionality. George Martin just said, I agree with Kimberly Crenshaw. So this has to be on the front page of every vegan paper in the world right now. George Martin agrees. Let's work with Kimberly Crenshaw.
There you go.
You're the most intersectional person in this room.
If we're taking intersectionality to be the most charitable interpretation of what it is, the good thing, I'm the biggest intersectional in the world, mate. I don't want any discrimination, the animal rights movement. I want us all to get along. I want it to be a big and inclusive movement that includes everyone and everyone's happy and we all have a party. I'm the biggest intersectional in the world, if that's what it means.
There you go.
If it means, though, Wayne Hsiung, you have a different opinion from me about this. You are therefore a racist or a genocider or a sexist. Get the fuck out of the movement. This country is engaging in this thing because of their government. Therefore, we have to hate this country as a unified movement. You know, if that's what intersectionality is, which is how we're seeing it practiced in the movement, basically the most racist, xenophobic, hateful, homophobic, I also want to say, a lot of people don't realise this, but basically every ism there is, intersectionals are the biggest practices of that in the animal rights movement, and the issues that they're talking about are basically non-issues. I haven't seen a single person on the right in the vegan movement say, I don't want black people at the march or anything. No one's saying this. I have seen intersectionals say, I don't want, Israelis to be in this group. I don't want so-and-so to be in this group. They're the biggest fucking discriminators in the movement.
Yeah, we got to push back against that hard. That's super messed up. And I've seen a lot of that recently too. Just saying we want to make this an unsafe space for Zionists, that sort of thing. I don't think people have bad intentions when they're saying these things, but it's incredibly counterproductive and it's not helpful.
I know. Well, I think some people do have very bad intentions. I mean, I'll talk to you about a very disturbing conversation I had recently with a guy on X. This guy is an animal rights activist based in Northern Ireland, and we somehow got into an argument about October the 7th on X, in which he was praising the attacks. And he was calling...
You said this is a vegan.
He's a vegan, he's an animal rights activist, he's based in Northern Ireland, and he justified October the 7th, and I think I sent him the video of Shani Luke's half-naked body being dragged through the streets by Hamas and saying, how can you say that I'm not a vegan because I am not pro-Palestine, but you say if we're judging by that metric, how are you a vegan, mate, if you support half-naked women being dragged through the streets on a jeep by men chanting Allahu Akbar? And do you know what he replied with, Wayne? And I've got the screenshots for this for anyone who thinks I'm lying about this. He He said, "Good, another Zionist rat dead." That's what he said about Shani Luke's body being paraded through the streets of Gaza.
Yeah.
And he's telling
that shit's pretty horrible.
Yeah, and he's telling people that they're not vegan because they, I don't know, voted Donald Trump, or they are right-leaning, or because they have some view about the war in Gaza. He's telling people they're not vegan, and he supports women being dragged through the streets by Islamists.
Yeah, but isn't this just some random dude on Twitter? It's like, why are we ascribing... I'm not saying that there aren't broader cultural tendencies that need to be combated, but... Yeah, I mean, we agree on that. That's not the sort of approach we need to take to intersectionality or movement building. It's not going to work, and it's pretty ethically objectionable. So, yeah. One thing I want to say is, like, on this issue of like whether intersectionality is good or bad for the movement, I think hopefully everyone at this point, after Trump won and after so many people of color, gay people, I mean, everyone moved to the right in the United States in light of the most recent election, and a lot of it had to do with the tone of the left, this just censorious, hateful, aggressive tone that was so off-putting that nobody wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Having said that, even if the left didn't take that tone and had a more inclusive approach to intersectionality, the other critique of intersectionality that I think is quite sound, and this is like a more troubling critique for me because it's one that I'm not sure about, but it seems like the evidence shows it's true, is that there's a lot of value in just focusing on a single issue, right? So two pieces of evidence for this. David Cole, who's a law professor at Georgetown University, a very distinguished scholar of social movements, he wrote this book called Engines of Liberty, which has examined social movements that succeeded and social movements that failed. And one of his central findings is that the social movements that succeeded were relentlessly focused in terms of their messaging discipline. They did not deviate from their main issue, whatever it was. But another piece of evidence is there's this paper, and I just Googled the exact title. People can look this up yourself, and I can send it to you afterwards if you want.
Yeah.
George. For the record, these are two black academics, not that it makes a big difference in their experimental results. And it's published in the top political science journal. It's called Which Identity Frames Boost Support for and Mobilization in the Black Lives Matter Movement, an experimental test. And this is one of the few experiments that I've seen that actually took data and took like a real world kind of situation and tried to figure out whether intersectionality works. And what they found, not only was that intersectionality does not work, and the specific test.
Have to send me this paper afterwards, Wayne.
No, I will send it to you because I just think it's important for people to know what the facts of the world are. Again, if you're trying to create social change, you cannot do that if you're delusional. You have to be attached to the real world and real world data, and that was my background. I was a social scientist before I was an activist. And what the real world shows is when they did a test to try and convince people to write a letter on behalf of Black Lives Matter, I think it was like a letter advocating for better policies in policing. If they said, could you please write this letter because black people are being killed unjustly? And they just added the words, especially women, or especially LGBT people, not only did that deter net participation, like fewer people, just adding those two words, especially women or especially LGBT people, actually made fewer people participate and join the movement. But very interestingly, in the same study, it didn't even increase participation among LGBT and women, right? If you added the word especially women, it didn't even increase the likelihood that women would participate. And they were kind of puzzled by this. But among those of us who actually practice message discipline and are constantly looking at what sorts of communication work, what sort of communication don't, it was not surprising to me, partly because of just message focus. It is very hard for people to wrap their heads around even a relatively simple message. And if you start expanding that message to complicated subjects, people are less willing to act, right? Like all else equal, a 5-word tweet is always better than a 500-word tweet. It just is. Because a 5-word tweet will be easier to understand. People will grasp it more quickly. They're more able to process it and act upon it than if you write like a 500-word essay, right? And the problem with a lot of intersectional campaigns is they just complicate the issue. And so, for example, someone who's sitting there at home deciding, should I write this letter? When you add the words, especially LGBT people, even if they actually support both causes, they might even support Black Lives Matter and LGBT causes. But they might just get confused and say like, okay, I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to write now. Like I understood initially when you just talked about black people being killed, I should write about how police people are being killed. I don't actually quite understand how this intersects with the LGBT issue. And so now that I'm confused, I can't act, right? And that is a very common problem in social movements. It's literally, there's a term for this that Zeynep Tufekci, a sociologist in North Carolina, came up with. She's at UNC. She's a New York Times columnist, one of the most distinguished sociologists of our generation. She calls it tactical freeze. And the idea behind tactical freeze is basically when the decision-making becomes too complicated, there's too many stakeholders in the room, and I just can't even figure out what to do. And too often, I think this is what happens with intersectionality. So, yeah, anyways, but I'll send you the paper afterwards.
It makes a big mess of things, Wayne. And you know what? The hilarious observation I wanted to make is they actually kind of agree with keeping other movements about that issue. For example, if you shout All Lives Matter at a Black Lives Matter protest, they'll say stuff like, we know that all lives matter, but this movement is specifically meant to be about black lives. But then what happens when intersectionals come into the animal rights movement? They're the All Lives Matter people of the animal rights movement.
Are. No, I agree. They are. That is a very fair critique. Because I actually think it's fair for a Black Lives Matter protest to say, if someone comes in and says all lives matter or women's rights or gay rights, I think it's completely fair for them to say, look, that's not our issue. You know, we don't want that messaging as part of our protest because they're trying to create coherent, simple messaging that people understand. And yes, the all lives matter stuff, it becomes more complicated. We're trying to talk about racism here, and you know, there's a lot of problems that white people have, that Asian people have, but this is not the space for that. Mm-hmm. But you're right that if we believe that and we agree with that, then similarly, when someone who's a non-animal rights actor, who's even animal rights activist who wants to bring in Palestine or Israel or Gaza or October 7th or Hamas or defunding the police or gay rights or whatever it is into the animal rights movement, we should also be confident enough to say, look, that may very well be a very important issue for you and for others. However, the thing that is bringing us all together into this space is animal rights. And we need to focus on that. And it's not fair for you to talk about that other issue. I mean, the comparison I've made, which I stole this from Arthur Chu, who's a really smart guy on Twitter, is it reminds me of, like, say you're in the cancer wing of a hospital and you've got, you know, your mom. This literally happened to me. My mom died of cancer. And you know, we're sitting in this room after she's just had surgery. She had brain cancer surgery. They had to remove the top of her skull. Like, she was actually awake during this entire process, too. It's such a creepy process. They literally keep you awake because when you do brain surgery, you have to keep the person awake because otherwise you can remove parts of the brain that will just, like, shut the person down, you know? So you're actually awake. It's like local anesthesia. They cut your skull off, and they're, like, talking to you while they're cutting parts of your brain out for brain cancer surgery. Oh my God. Super freaky experiment. She's, like, in terrible condition afterwards. She's lying there, enormous amount of pain. Like, there's nausea. It's, like, a terrible procedure. If someone had run into that room and started screaming, don't you realize people are dying of heart disease? What the fuck is wrong with you all? There's an emergency in this country. People are dying of heart attacks everywhere. I would have been like, you piece of shit.
Yeah.
Get out of here. Do you realize my mom is dying of cancer right now? How dare you come in? And that's not because I don't agree with what he's saying. It's just not the space for it. Like, have the common decency to realize that if we say this is a space for animals and animal rights, do not bring in other stuff to distract us from the thing we all said this is a space for, right? And similarly, if you got the cancer wing in the hospital, don't come in running and screaming and talking about heart attacks, even if we agreed that heart attacks are a huge problem. And that's the way I feel like a lot of activists have hijacked the animal rights movement, that even if their issues are incredibly important, and I'd say this on both sides, like on the Israeli-Palestine conflict, I think on both sides, I think there are legitimate grievances that Jewish people and Israeli people have. I think there are legitimate grievances that Palestinian and pro-Palestinian people have. Just like I think there are legitimate concerns people have about heart attacks. Yeah. Nonetheless, the animal rights movement is not the space for you to litigate those disputes.
Agreed.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I think your analogy was perfect there. So with the horrific issue of the brain cancer that happened to your mum, the metaphor there is these animals are going through just the most horrendous time, and then someone is running in 2020, whenever it is, and saying, why aren't you talking about this? And it's like, bro, get the fuck off our page. We're here to post about animals. You can find these other issues important if you want. We're not saying you shouldn't. we're not making a statement from the page saying not to care about these issues. But don't come to our page, start shitting on our page, trying to cancel us because we're not speaking up about your,
Agreed.
comparatively, to be honest, microscopic issue.
Yeah. I don't even think we have to say it's a microscopic issue. And there are going to be disagreements about how microscopic any other secondary issue is. And secondary, not even in terms of importance. I mean, I do think animal rights is more important than any other issue. It's the greatest moral crisis facing the human species.
Yeah.
But even if I didn't believe that, right, say I was in the wing of a hospital where my mom just broke her arm and she was getting her arm fixed. And I would agree that heart attacks are a bigger deal than, arm fractures. Yeah. Nonetheless, if someone came in screaming, saying, stop working on your mom's arm. Don't you realize my mom has a heart attack? I'd be like, bruh, I realize that. Nonetheless, this is a space for arm fractures, not for heart attacks. That's kind of messed up for you to come in and scream at me because I'm just trying to help my mom, Yeah. Now, it's for the animal rights movement, it's the opposite because everyone screaming at us is always talking about an issue that is, just by objective measures, much less serious and much less severe because of the number and the degree of the suffering the animals are suffering. Yeah. But yeah, we're in agreement there. All right. I think we're getting to the point where, we're at our hard stop, but is there anything else? I mean, maybe we were going to talk about natalism. Let's talk about that another day. Let's discuss that and debate that another time.
Yeah.
I actually suspect we're probably on the same side of this issue. Are you pro baby?
No.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I was wrong. I'm very pro baby. I'm trying to convince my wife to have a baby. She doesn't want to have babies with me.
Oh, well, this paves the way for an excellent conversation.
Oh, no. My wife is going to be so happy to hear you arguing with me about this. I mean, she's going to win ultimately, one way or the other, because she's got the right to do whatever she wants with her body. But I'm trying to persuade her. All right, another day, another time. So you're working with We the Free now, is that correct?
I'm a volunteer with We the Free. Yeah, I here in Bristol. I was an organizer with them, but I've had to step down recently because I've had a lot of shit going on in my life. So yeah, I've stepped down from being an organizer with them, but I'm still active with them, still volunteer. And I was at VARC.
So what are you doing? Where can people find you? How people start? Are you still doing AV stuff?
I might go to the occasional cube, but I'm not in any way kind of connected with the organization or anything like that. But
so you're just basically doing your YouTube. Is that the main thing you're doing? The YouTube and I didn't even realize, this is super embarrassing because you're a guest on my show. I didn't even realize that you still have a podcast in addition to the YouTube.
Oh yeah, well the podcast is a bit more sporadic, to be fair. So, but I do an episode every few months, kind of thing, for the podcast, and so you can find me, Carnism Debunked on Instagram and on X, and then I'm on Facebook. I've got my YouTube channel, George Martin Carnism Debunked. I'm everywhere. I'm absolutely everywhere.
Cool, good stuff. Well, appreciate you coming on, George. It was a spirited discussion. I love kind of your willingness to talk about things. I love your confidence and willingness to say things other people aren't willing to say. And I frankly even love it when we disagree because I learn things from the disagreement. And I'm going to go look up Justine Damond right now. So appreciate everything you're offering to me and other activists in the movement, especially when you disagree. Okay?
Yeah, same to you, Wayne. Really enjoyed the conversation. I love disagreeing with you as well. It's great.
Cool. Until next time, brother.
Thank you.
We don't have to hurt animals. We can protect them. We don't have to kill them. We can care for them. And that's who we're meant to be, right? That's who we are when we're at our best. We're caring for each other and for the other living beings of this earth and not hurting them.